Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us for another Thirst for More webinar. We're excited to have you here with us this evening and excited to have a new speaker with us this evening as well, Dr. Chase Hayden. A little bit about Dr. Chase. He is a practitioner, a chiropractor. He does quantum neurology, AK. He has his ACN. So very well-rounded in all things, and is the owner of the Hayden Institute in Houston, Texas, where he really emphasizes clinical nutrition and functional neurology. So no better topic for him to cover than neuroinflammation with us this evening. A couple housekeeping things before I turn it over to him. We are recording the presentation, and you will get that sent to you automatically from Zoom in about 24 hours from now. It'll also include the presentation for this evening, but I will be throwing that into the chat box as well. But just in case you have any issues getting it from the chat box, it will be included with the email and the recording that, again, will come tomorrow evening. There is a Q&A box, so if you have questions as Dr. Chase is going through his presentation this evening, please throw those into the Q&A box, and then you will also have access to the chat box and can use that as well for questions or anything you want to share as we go throughout. And then at the end, there's going to be a survey. So we would love if you would take the time to fill out. It's very quick, just a few short questions, but we really take that feedback into consideration when we're choosing topics and time and all of those things. So would love if you would take a moment to fill that out at the end of the presentation this evening. I had a chance to glance through Dr. Chase's slides, so I'm going to turn it over quickly to him. Hopefully, I know we're at the end of the day for most of us, but hopefully you have some brain power left this evening to really soak in all Dr. Chase has to teach us. I think you're in for a great presentation with tons of information and all the things, tools, and things that he will share with us this evening. So without further ado, Dr. Chase, I'm going to turn it over to you.
Awesome. Thank you very much. I appreciate that. It's exciting to be here with all of y'all today. It's my first time teaching a webinar in this format. I've taught classes like this in real life here in the Houston area for the standard process rep that's nearby. And we have a lot of fun with this workshop. And this class is designed to be a workshop, but I know it's a little bit more difficult when we are doing things digitally to practice on each other and see how things are going. So hopefully today, my goal has been to help you have an opportunity to take this information and start using it tomorrow morning. Be able to start implementing some of these evaluation techniques or tools to be able to identify neuroinflammation with the patients you see and be able to start changing lives like we do on a daily basis, but maybe get some clinical pearls of wisdom out of this. So like she said, my name is Chase. Our goal today is to hopefully get my little mouse thingy to work because it's not right now. And then we will get started and get going. I apologize, guys. This is not working good. So 1 second. I hope I don't have to do it by hand the rest of the time. All right, perfect. There we go. So as a quick aside, according to our brain, the brain is the most important organ we have, right? So if we're thinking neuroinflammation, there's a lot of stuff that can come downstream from that. And obviously, my goal today is to give you tools in your tool belt that you can take and starting tomorrow, be able to implement and just change the lives of these individuals that you see. But if the brain is jacked up, we're going to be jacked up. And a lot of stuff comes downstream once the brain starts becoming neuroinflamed and starting having a bunch of issues with that. So let's think back a long time ago when you were in school. There are some brain cells. Some are called neurons, some are called glia, some are called microglia. When there's a breakdown or a dysfunction in any of these areas, we can have different presentations of neurologic activity. We can have different presentations of the immune system that appears like an immune problem, but can have its roots back in the nervous system. We can have motor disorders, we can have pain disorders. We can have a bunch of, or a variety of different presentations that occur because one of these cells is becoming a little bit inflamed and not functioning the way it's supposed to. In an effort to try and get through the slides we want to go through and get into clinical application, I'm going to spend a little bit less time on these things you can read later, but there are a couple of central concepts and ideas or keys that can help us to be able to hone in on where neuroinflammation is starting and how we might be able to address it. So I like this quote here from this journal, The Devil is in the Details. It says, inflammatory responses that are centralized within the spinal cord are generally, brain and spinal cord are generally referred to as neuroinflammatory. And in our hyper-compartmentalized medical model, that basically means that when you have a GI problem, nobody thinks brain or nervous system. When you have a foot issue, nobody thinks brain or nervous system. We hyper-compartmentalize in medicine sometimes to the detriment of our patients. But the cool thing about a holistic approach to looking at patients and zooming out a little bit is we can address neuroinflammatory conditions as they present downstream in a variety of different ways. So this inflammatory response through the nervous system is mediated through a variety of cytokines. And as these cytokines become imbalanced, these inflammatory chemicals that affect the hormone system, the immune system, and the nervous system, we're going to see a lot of downstream stuff. So I guarantee you, the people that are coming to see you right now have neuroinflammatory states going on in their body. And if we can identify them and address them appropriately, we'll see some pretty good changes in their life. So let's just brainstorm for a second. And normally we would do this in real life, but I want you to, throw it in the chat box or tell your neighbor as you're driving down the road, about to drive through or whatever you're doing right now. What are some neuroinflammatory things that you can think of right now? So when you think neuroinflammation, does your brain immediately go to Alzheimer's disease, Parkinson's, which is the traditional medical approach, which is definitely a right place to go. But what other neuroinflammatory things do you think of whenever you hear the word neuroinflammatory conditions? So I see in the chat, multiple sclerosis, we've got concussion. If you got any more, don't be afraid to just throw them in that box there. We've got all autoimmune. Imagine that. All autoimmune could have traces to neuroinflammatory stuff. When that person with Hashimoto's comes in, who's only ever seen an endocrinologist, there could be a neuroinflammatory thing started associated with that. We've got dementia, infections, tinnitus, depression, anxiety. Y'all are all right on the same page, right? These neuroinflammatory effects are all over the place. Brain fog, diabetes. Thanks, guys. That's awesome that you're being able to generate these ideas, because sometimes we fall into that hyper compartmentalized way as well. We see a patient walk in, they've got, this back thing's going on, or they hand you a lab test that says high cholesterol, or they say, my doctor says I'm Hashimoto's, and we immediately just kind of compartmentalize and go boom, 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 boom. I know what to do with Hashimoto's. I'll get them off of gluten. I'll give them thiotrophine PMG. I'll do these things, but we may forget that their brain is still involved in this process at the same time. So if we can step back a little bit and start trying to figure out where might these neuroinflammatory conditions present downstream, whether it be seizures or allergies or diabetes or whatever it might be, we will be able to do a lot of good for our patients. So just using a quick PubMed search of neuroinflammatory things, I went through and tried finding a bunch that had peer-reviewed medical research tying their inflammatory triggers to a symptomatic presentation. So imagine this, and y'all listed a lot of these, but there might be some on here that you may not have recognized. Excessive use of medications can be a neuroinflammatory trigger. And we may not think about something like that because we're like, oh, well, the person's properly prescribed this pharmaceutical agent to help with certain conditions. And though we're going to change their diet or their lifestyle, that thing could be contributing to what's going on with the rest of their presentation. Obesity, chronic pains, the various psychological disorders we talked about, leaky gut, mold toxicity. There's a variety of inflammatory things that can have a root cause in the nervous system. And as it becomes inflamed, can start trickling downstream to a variety of areas. So in neuroinflammatory presentations, there are some positive things that your body's trying to do in the process. Injury occurs, insult happens to the nervous system. Your body's trying to get the immune system to activate, run in, straighten things up so they can go back to better immune conditioning, better immune communication, develop like it's supposed to, etc. But yet these other inflammatory responses might shut down some other things, like cause some swelling or some tissue damage, might lead to some neurodegenerative changes, or it might trigger that portion of the immune system called the microglia to be a little bit more engaged and overactive, that sometimes doesn't quite turn off because it gets excited and it just starts this loop of inflammatory response. So neuroinflammation, though it's an appropriate response at sometimes, needs to be able to overcome its systemic effect and then go back away. And when that doesn't happen, that's when the patient presents with these longer term chronic symptoms that we're talking about. So here's a little biochemistry if you get bored. Cytokines, we mentioned them a little bit earlier, things like interleukins, tumor necrosis factor, the ROS system, there's a bunch of them there. These things can lead to neuroprotective activity as well as neurodegenerative activity. And when they become out of sync with each other, neuroinflammatory conditions develop in our offices, and they come in every single day and they're told that they can't be helped by everyone else. So that's why they're finding awesome doctors like you, and y'all are doing good stuff for them already. So this might be a different way of looking at some of your patients that maybe you struggle with, but y'all are already crushing it in your practices. So that's exciting to be able to share this platform with you. and talk about how we might be able to help people out. So as you think neuroinflammation and you're going to support this individual, let's assume that we're taking dietary considerations already. And so we're possibly modifying the patient's diet. A common way we see that happen was like a lower carb, higher protein, maybe get off of inflammatory foods like glutens or dairies or corns or artificial sweeteners or something like that. Some of these neuroexcitatory triggers, let's assume that's already taken care of. What are some of your favorite neuroinflammatory things? No, I'm sorry, neuro anti-inflammatory things that you like to give people. Like if someone walks into your office and has something like concussion or a neuroinflammatory condition, what goes through your mind where you're like, man, I need to check this on this person, or I might start them on this protocol? Drop that in the chat as well. And let's brainstorm with each other for a little bit as we discuss what specific products you like to use in your clinical experience and with your clinical expertise that you've found results with. What is something like? We see turmeric and neurogenics. Those are two huge ones, especially with the fenugreek coupled with that turmeric that allows it to pass the blood-brain barrier. We got some other ones like arnica and boswellia complex. Boswellia complex is huge, not only from an anti-inflammatory standpoint to the brain, but we know that's a huge one for the gut too, designed for stuff like ulcerative colitis, which can be a neuroinflammation process of the gut where we may not look immediately because we're thinking brain all the time, right? Oprima, EPA, DHA, Boswellia and arnica again, Boswellia complex. Everybody likes Boswellia, right? Some of these fish oils and the omegas. We know with standard process, we have some awesome omegas. We've got, like tuna fish oil, we've got the Oprimas, we've got the cod liver oil. We got some really good stuff to help with just lowering that down. LDN, low dose naltrexone. Some of us, if you have pharmaceutical licenses, might be able to give a low dose naltrexone type effect to be able to down-regulate that neuroinflammatory response. Red light therapy, someone likes, so that's good stuff. We can use those photons from red light to reduce neuroinflammation, can kind of stimulate some ATP, pulsed EMF, swelling of the brain using homeopathic stuff. Apis, it looks like. So yeah, so there's a lot of really good things. Thanks for your brainstorming ideas, because there are some things there that I'm not super familiar with, like the Apis. I'm not sure what that is, but that's awesome. I can look up that thing and look from this clinical reference to see how I might be able to use that homeopathy with these patients. As I was brainstorming for this presentation, I thought about a couple that I like to do, and I semi-compartmentalized them based off some different ideas that kind of run through my brain, specifically when I think neuroinflammation. So obviously, when I'm trying to just kind of calm down things upstairs, I like neurogenics. I like the turmeric forte. I really love chlorophyll complex. I just met with my rep today from Standard Process, and it looks like chlorophyll complex is the third leading product in my office that I've sold this quarter. I really like it a lot for gut things. I like it for brain things. Huge amount of barrier support there. And since your blood-brain barrier acts very similar to your gut barrier or your lung barrier or your sinus barrier or your skin barrier, I like supporting that barrier complex with or that barrier system with chlorophyll complex. Easy Mag, we see that as a version of magnesium that seeps through the blood-brain barrier, gets into the nervous system, kind of calms some things down. We know that it performs equally as well, if not better, than magnesium threonate, which has a lot of research behind it. So I kind of put that chunk together right there, thinking of these are some things I think of when someone walks in, and I just need to put that brain that's on fire, just calm it down a little bit. But yet, we've got those protomorphogens, these DNA extracts that Royally so brilliantly evaluated and established. And so I like thymus PMG. If you haven't read that like 25-page white paper on the effects of thymus PMG and concussion protocols, huge amounts of research coming out showing how the protomorphogen extract can help with neuroinflammatory responses, can be neuroinflammatory protective. So if you take it preventatively, something like thymus PMG for all your soccer players, your hockey players, your football players, so that if they get a concussion, they recover faster from it, but also neuroinflammatory reducing for people that have these neuroinflammatory conditions. Neurotrophin PMG, RNA. RNA we think of a lot as a way for short-term memory, balancing coordination. It can be one of these protomorphogens that comes in and just kind of helps calm down the body. I like the oils like we talked about, cod liver oil, Oprima, tuna fish oil, things like that. I like some bee-related things, specifically bee core. I use a lot of bee core in the office, more than Cataplex B by itself or Cataplex B2. But I like bee core, and I like some of these other ones as adjuncts to help with the B portion of neurotransmitter development, mitochondrial activity and development of the brain, how we make ATP through the system. B6 niacinamide, seen so many people be able to reduce their pharmaceutical or psychiatric medications by using things with B6 niacinamide coupled together. These products are so wonderfully formulated to be able to help that inflammatory response to the brain. It's huge. That last section down there, it might be a little bit weird to see those there, but those are a lot of gut-related things that we often think of for parasites or bacterias or mycotoxins or whatever it might be, but a lot of infection modulating effects or infection modulating herbs do wonders for the brain and can help with this second brain in our gut, but also calm down neuroinflammatory effects. There's a huge paper on andrographis and the effect of neuroinflammatory benefit when it comes to Alzheimer's and dementia patients specifically. Lots of good stuff, and you have access to these wonderful herbs and compounds and protomorphogens to just lower that inflammatory response with people. So hopefully if there's something there that you haven't seen or thought about using, that you look at that and say, oh, maybe I can use thymus PMG for these people, or maybe I can use gut flora complex. Even though it's a brain thing, it's also a gut thing, and it's really hard to separate the two. So those are some pretty good things. So more importantly, how do we identify these neuroinflammatory conditions in our practice? As I was thinking about how we might present this in a way to where you can use this literally tomorrow morning, I kind of broke it down into 4 main areas. These are the 4 areas I consider with most of my patients. I don't use exactly every one of these forms, but just some ideas of how we might look at the patient and start thinking, maybe their brain's a little bit on fire. So what happens whenever you schedule a patient and they show up late, they haven't filled out their forms, they write sloppily, they misspell words, they're all over the place, right? That could be the initial sign that you say, this person's brain on fire. Now, they might just be an out to lunch person that is never on time at all, but that could still mean that their brain's on fire, and we need to start being aware that there are some things that could be going on with this patient that we can be helping out. So that's why I like this preliminary evaluation concept. So here's some things that kind of run through my mind. I did a lot of stuff with Datis Karazian over the years, and I like this little chart that he put together to try and help identify some neuroinflammatory effects that might go on in a patient's life that can give you some insight long before you actually are doing an exam and touching that patient and trying to get a history or whatnot. So I like this as a way of just priming my pump whenever I'm getting ready, whenever I'm going with the patient. So what are some history forms that you use? Standard process obviously has a symptom survey for. Let's pretend you're brand new. You've never really looked at a patient other than seeing them as a chiropractic patient. You run x-rays, you do your exam. If you just did something as simple as adding a symptom survey form into your new patient paperwork, you would have an opportunity to start seeing other things going on in patients' lives that they are giving you permission to address. So even if you run a full-on, straight chiropractic, only deal with musculoskeletal dysfunction clinic, if you add that page on there and all of a sudden your patient tells you that foods upset their stomach, they get a lump in their throat, they can't swallow appropriately, and you say, is it okay if we address this as well? And they say, yeah, I'd love to. I want my neck to be fixed, but if you can help with my digestion, if you can get my blood pressure down, if you can get my heart disease to go away, if you can get my energy to come up, well, you've just changed their life. And so these forms are huge. They're such a good version of just evaluating the whole person while addressing their specific need that they came in to see you with. So if they've got neck pain, be the best chiropractor you can be to help that person. But don't be afraid to just implement something as simple as a symptom survey form to be able to just let you help them. Huge information from survey forms. I have a symptom survey form in my notes that are 3 pages long, and it's just large amounts of compartmentalized information to where if a patient can't fill that out, I think neuroinflammation. I also think they may not care. So if that's something I want to be mindful of is, do you care enough about your own health to take some steps to get it better? But if you can fill out my paperwork, if you can show up on time, you've just given me so much information, and I know I'm going to be able to help you get better. Even if I can't help your structural thing because you're coming to see me as a chiropractor, I can help you somewhere else because I'm going to change your diet, I'm going to change your lifestyle, I'm going to change your sleep, I'm going to support you with whole food-based nutrition. You're going to be better by doing the things we do in our office, and I'm very confident in that as I have a chance to help out with these individuals. But there's some other forms, right? So these are like medically approved official documents to try and develop neuroinflammatory conditions with people. So this particular scale, helps you try and identify the clock. We remember that in neurodiagnosis class in like Tri 5 or whenever you had it. Can you draw a clock? Can you put the hands on the clock appropriately? Can you trace lines? These are diagnostic level questionnaires, but they can help with certain neuroinflammatory things. I had a patient just yesterday who came in with Parkinson's, and he was telling me about his yearly Medicare exam that he had to go through, where they asked him to draw a clock again and to trace these lines. And I showed him this form, and he goes, yeah, you do that too? I was like, well, sometimes, but not really. We try and address things in a slightly different way. But these questionnaires can be great insight and tools to help identify an objective measurement for neuroinflammatory conditions. Here's some other ones. I'm going to skip through these. You can look through them as you get a chance to download the notes and look at stuff. But questionnaires can be a very simple and easy way to start changing your practice tomorrow as you attempt to identify, locate, and support the neuroinflammatory conditions that are going on in your current patient base or in every single new patient that starts coming from now on. Because if all you do is just slap on a questionnaire at the end and they fill that out and give you more information, you're one step closer to getting them to the them they want to be, even if they came to you originally for just some back pain stuff. Am I going too fast? If I'm going too fast, y'all just kind of flag it in the notes or something, and I'll slow down a little bit. I apologize if I am, but another thing we could potentially do, and this is for some people that are very familiar with it, is perform some level of laboratory or functional medicine assessment. Now, some states may allow you to do lab tests. Texas, where I am, allows us to order labs. So I like to order labs on patients. And when they come in for their new patient exam, they filled out my questionnaires, they've done all my paperwork, we start doing stuff. And if it is warranted, we will run some labs. I don't technically run labs on every person that comes in, but I'd say probably 70% of the patients that come in with some type of metabolic issue, we're going to go ahead and do some lab tests because I like the information. I like the objective data. I like finding things that I didn't suspect. And I like being able to give the patient something that I went over with them and say, this is what's going on with you. And this is what we're going to recheck later in 3 or 4 months from now to make sure we're trending in the right direction. Because I want your symptoms to do well, but I also want your objective measurements to do well at the same time. And these functional labs and these medical assessments can do that. So something that's super awesome that I love to run, that's never run by anybody, is a C-peptide. If you don't remember what C-peptide does, it's released by the pancreas as part of the insulin and C-peptide molecule. Insulin gets separated from C-peptide and goes away very quickly, in less than 5 minutes in most people. But C-peptide lingers a little bit. So if you have a low to normal insulin, but you have a high C-peptide, it means that person is metabolically dragging stuff through, but they're still having a blood sugar problem. Blood sugar dysregulation is one of the most common neuroinflammatory habits that people have. So we as Americans eat like garbage, we feed ourselves terribly, and we mostly rely on carbohydrates and simple sugars. So therefore, if we have too many blood sugar regulating issues, our neuroinflammatory system was going to start spitting out some cytokines. And it's missed routinely by a lot of practitioners who only run a blood glucose as part of their comprehensive metabolic panel, or run a blood glucose and a hemoglobin A1C, and that hemoglobin A1C isn't bad enough yet because they didn't check insulin, they didn't check C-peptide. I like C-peptide as a hidden marker to try and identify some neuroinflammatory stuff. Goes right along with that blood sugar handling system of evaluations. Doesn't mean they have to have diabetes to have neuroinflammation from blood sugar though, even though type 3 diabetes is often referenced as Alzheimer's disease in the peer-reviewed medical research. Doesn't have to be that far gone for C-peptide to be up. So I like it in the less than 2.2 range. LabCorp obviously is going to have their own reference ranges. Great test to run. Like we mentioned a second ago, hemoglobin A1C, often run by diabetic practitioners. You know, if you've got a patient who's seeing someone else because of their diabetes, they'll have hemoglobin A1Cs and they'll get those checked every 90 days or so. But if you're seeing a person for the first time and they're describing neuroinflammatory conditions, they're overweight, they eat like the standard American does, this is a wonderful test. It gives you that average of what 90 days are doing in their life from a blood sugar handling standpoint. I like less than 5.4. That's low from a neuroinflammatory standpoint, according to this test. Obviously, LabCorp is going to say 5.7 to 6.4. This is Houston LabCorp numbers. It might be different if you're in Chicago or St. Louis or something like that. But Houston LabCorp numbers, this is what they want us to be. I like to bring it down as low as 5.4 because that's a really good indication that you're not creating neuroinflammation at that point, at least from a carbohydrate or a blood sugar handling standpoint. You can get it from something else, but at least we're handling things that are controllable by the patient at home as they make the decision to put that Twinkie in their mouth or not, right? So C-reactive protein, high sensitivity has these ranges. You can still get a regular C-reactive protein from LabCorp or Quest or something like that. Most practitioners are switching over to the high sensitivity version. I like it to be less than 1. Why not have low levels of interleukin-6 in their life? That's mostly what C-reactive protein seems to reflect. So if I can have low interleukin-6, less inflammatory response, they're going to do better. If it's higher than 1, but under 3, technically that's about average. Once it goes above 3, there's inflammation going on somewhere. Now, to be fair, if you walked into an ER and you had like a 12 C-reactive protein high sensitivity, nobody's going to bat an eye. So they wait for numbers in the ER to be a lot higher before they start freaking out. C-reactive protein can be an inflammation marker of the heart, but also don't rule out things like bacterial infections that can lead to a high C-reactive protein, liver dysfunction, high C-reactive protein, neuroinflammation, high C-reactive protein. Great test, kind of scans through a couple of things, look through the rest of your lab, see what the liver enzymes are doing, see what blood sugar is doing, see what the thyroid's doing, see how the rest of the body's telling you a story. But if that's high, Radar should start going up. Homocysteine, we obviously see that when it comes to heart-related stuff, liver-related things. In the autism spectrum world, homocysteine is frequently run as a cheating way to see if methylation is working like it's supposed to. But it's a very appropriate test to be able to look at. Helps you kind of see what's going on with neuroinflammatory things. Here's LabCorp's range. There's my reference ranges. I don't run homocysteine on every single person, but definitely starts coming up if I'm thinking big neuroinflammation, big cardiovascular things, chronic immune things, homocysteine gets added to the mix. And this test here I like a lot. It's the TMB lymphocyte subset. And this is a crazy test. Well, every time I run, not every time, not anymore. When I first started running this test a lot, I would get a call from the CDC here in Texas, and they'd say, hey, Dr. Hayden, we just want to confirm that patient X is doing okay with their HIV or AIDS. Can you help us with that? And I was like, excuse me? And they're like, yeah, you ran this test, a TMB lymphocyte subset. And we know that's a common test with AIDS patients. We're just making sure that this person is not like spreading or getting worse or whatever. And so after a few conversations reminding them that I was the chiropractor in town that does functional medicine things and nutritional approaches, they stopped calling me. But occasionally I'll get a call from a new person that says, how's that person's AIDS going? So if you run this, just know that it's commonly run on patients with HIV or AIDS-related imbalance. Now, why? The T's and the B's of the lymphocyte system help regulate immune modulation of a variety of things. And if it's stuck in a seesaw that's up and down and the T cells are way too high and the B cells are too low, it's probable that that person's HIV medication is no longer doing what they needed to do. And that person's going to be spiraling downhill very quickly. From a functional concept of neuroinflammation, the T's and the B cells do a lot with regulating the reactive oxygen species and the reactive nitrogen species. So therefore, it can be an indirect marker of how these cytokines, how the T cells and B cells are influencing cytokine activity and can be some imbalance things. If you've got an autoimmune condition and you've seen 12 other doctors and you show up in my office, I'm running this test on you because I want to know how is your immune system stuck and what types of things might I do to change it back. So great ways of looking at how we can try and shift the immune system around while addressing the nervous system. There's a question about how to get a copy of the white paper. On the back end of your standard process account, there are places there we can get resources, and the Thymus PMG white paper is in there. And you'll need a doctorate degree in statistics and research, just so you know, to get through it. So make sure that you used a lot of ChatGPT to help you out, but it's a phenomenal paper. That's how I got through it, is a lot of ChatGPT to tell me how a lot of that information was there. So it's definitely on the back end of your standard process account, or your rep locally can get it for you. Or if you message me, like text me or something later, I'll try and get it out to you if you can't find it in one of those places. If you have questions, don't be hesitant to drop them in the chat. I can kind of see them here. Smash that like button. No, I'm just joking. We don't do that here. So needless to say, other tests you might want to look at might be things like a GI map if you've ever run stool testing on people. Cyrex testing has some neat tests to look at different blood-brain barrier things and autoimmunity to the nervous system. And then obviously heavy metal testing, if you've got heavy metal toxicity that can disrupt neuroinflammatory things, create some neuroinflammation and cause some problems. Of these tests, just so you're familiar with how I practice, I run more GI maps on people than any of those other ones. But occasionally I'll have discussions with patients that say, man, things just aren't going like I need them to, and we can't find autoimmunity anywhere else. Let's consider running one of these tests to see if you're having autoimmunity to the barrier or to some of these neuro tissues. So if you do have it, I can at least keep autoimmunity aware in my mind, because there's a lot of autoimmune stuff that gets a little bit screwy. But that GI map, so I just 2 days ago had a patient come in who has a bunch of absent seizures. He's 8 years old. He's sitting on my table. We're doing all of our exam testing, some of the stuff that we're going to talk about in just a minute. And I had a very distinct conversation with his mom and said, look, I think we're going to be able to help, but over the next 30 days, we're going to modify his diet. I'm going to give him some whole food nutrition, some herbs. We're going to do some neurologic stuff that I do. But if in 30 days we don't feel like he's moving in the right direction, I'm going to ask for a GI map, because that gut system can be doing stuff to the brain, and I want to make sure that's not an issue. But because of the cost, it's a $5 or $6 or something $100 test, I try and just do what I can do based off patient exam and support first, unless there's just a blaring issue that I need to address, and then I'll run something like that GI map. Which is your favorite heavy metal testing? I don't do a lot of heavy metal testing, to be fair. I've seen hair analysis. I've seen urine provocation testing. When I've done it, I usually do the urine related things, mostly because that seems to be a way that I can provoke using some chelators who to get things moving. but I've leaned toward the urine-based testing over the hair testing, but I'm nowhere near an expert in heavy metal related testing. Even though I do a lot of AK stuff and heavy metals might show up, I kind of lean on symptom presentation and muscle testing for metal related things as I'm doing detox, like the SP detox, the SP cleanse, kind of working through the purification program, knowing that metals are going to come out when I use things like GI Adsorb. Oh, I didn't put that on my chart. GI Adsorb is another good one when you're trying to mobilize things and create anti-inflammatory effects. So GI Adsorb, SP detox, that's been shown to pull heavy metals out as well. So I don't do a lot of testing on it. I mostly rely on GI maps, symptom surveys, neuro exam, and symptomatic presentation there. Next question asks something about who does the GI map test. I have an account with Rupa and Evexia, and depending on which one is running the special that week to just try and help my patients out with cost, I'll just run it through them and they'll deliver it directly to them. I can't even think of the name that does it right now of who actually runs the test, but I just get it ordered through them. There's another one about microbiome labs. There's a question there. What's your favorite for mold? My favorite test for mold. I also like to do urine metabolite testing for mold when I do that. And Avexia is great. I agree. Like I said, I have Avexia and Rupa accounts. And in an effort to try and help patients with out-of-pocket expenses, we just look up both and see which one's the cheapest that week, and we just run the test through there. Diagnostic Solutions is the GI map. Thank you for that, because I didn't prepare appropriately and know that beforehand. All right. So I do a lot of physical exam related stuff in my practice. Like we heard before, I do a lot of applied kinesiology. I do a lot of quantum neurology, which means I do a lot of manual muscle testing and physical exam looking things. I've been exposed to Dr. Karazian, who does a lot of neuro, like Carrick neuro type stuff in his classes where he tries to teach dumbed down versions because I'm not smart enough for the neurodiplomate program. But I like the implementation of physical exam things to be able to help patients to get better, but also to help me see what's going on with patients. So when I'm doing stuff with patients and I'm really trying to hone in on neurologic activity, these are some of the tests I do. Now, keep in mind, I muscle test the snot out of everybody that comes into my office, but there are certain parameters within muscle testing I do at the very beginning of my new patient visit, so I can make sure that whatever I'm trying to do physiologically with that manual muscle test is going to give me the most appropriate information we can. And this is why I would like to go over this concept called autogenic inhibition, or a muscle spindle cell response. And I'm attempting to not overwhelm many of you with AK stuff if you don't like AK things or you've never been exposed to it. But this is a concept in AK where you take any muscle that's strong and you try and identify if that muscle is normotonic or working appropriately versus hypertonic or inappropriately strong. And this is kind of weird to think about in a muscle testing world. So if you can imagine back to diagnostic class where you're doing a reflex test, like a deep tendon reflex, you got a patient, you hit their knee and it moves like it's supposed to. And we would all look at that and say, that's normal. Even if we're not neurologists or diplomates or whatever, we'd hit it and we'd say, yeah, that looks right. But if we hit their knee and they didn't move at all, we'd say, whoa, hypotonic reflex. Something's not firing the way it's supposed to, even though we gave it the appropriate stimulus. Or if we hit their leg and they kicked for 5 minutes, we'd all freak out and say, whoa, some type of neurology is going on here. I may not know what it is, but that's not right, okay? The same concept can be applied to muscle testing. And I know some of us might do muscle testing where we test a muscle and poke somewhere and it goes weak, or use a magnet or whatever. In an attempt to describe this particular challenge in the most neurologically sound way possible, I like the idea of manual muscle testing with this concept of a muscle spindle cell response. And I do this with every patient, even though I get into some of the more esoteric or weird things that I do with the muscle testing world. So with this being said, I will find a muscle. I like to isolate individual muscles. So maybe I'll do a pec muscle where I test that muscle. I then will squeeze the muscle fibers together, trying to get that spindle cells to freak out. And if I pinch that muscle together, I expect a weakening effect to occur to that muscle. And if that occurs, I now know this person's neuroinflammatory status is appropriate for testing. But what happens if I test a muscle and I pinch that muscle down and it doesn't go weak like it's supposed to? Well, that makes my ears perk up a little bit and say, this person might be jacked up neurologically somewhere. And if I keep on trying to use muscles as my diagnostic tool, I'm going to be spinning my wheels for a while because they're giving me bad information. Their muscle is too hypertonic, or it's hyper facilitated, and it's not going weak when I ask it to go weak. Just like if I stimulated that deep tendon reflex and they kept kicking for 5 minutes, I wouldn't just check the box and say, well, I jetted reflex, good luck, let's keep on going. So, in an effort to try and help you that might be seeing this, this is what this looks like in real life. And hopefully the video keeps up with what's going on here. And while this video is going, I'm going to read this long comment. So you might see me move around a little bit, but. All right, so this demonstration here is a concept called autogenic inhibition. It's a concept in applied kinesiology where we take a strong testing muscle, push up, and if that strong testing muscle is working appropriately, when I jab the muscle fibers together in the muscle belly, it should cause temporary weakness. Try like a minute. And it just happens for 1 or 2 times. It's just a quick thing with the nervous system. Push up, and then eventually she kicks back in. The way I describe this to patients is very similar to a deep tendon reflex. If I hit the knee and it kicks, we know that's a normal expected response. Therefore, that's a quick stretch of a muscle causing an involuntary contraction. I'm attempting to do the opposite. Push up, we've got a good strong muscle. I quick compress, it should cause temporary relaxation, and she goes weak. This is a normally functioning neurologic muscle, therefore normal autogenic inhibition. Whenever I don't push on it, it's back to strong. When I push on it, it's temporarily weak. Normal functioning muscle in that scenario. All right, so the reason I focus so much on the autogenic inhibition concept is because of the level of muscle testing I do in my office. If you're not a muscle tester, I think it'd be silly for you to test this all the time on every patient unless it made clinical sense. Maybe they got a sprained shoulder and they can't move their arm, and you're like, well, let me muscle test something. And you go to grab their arm and it hurts. That may not be good data anyways. So it may not be an appropriate test to use on someone if you don't muscle test and you're trying to test a joint that's already jacked up to begin with. But in some situations, it might be warranted to muscle test. And that's a neat tool to see if your nervous system is giving you appropriate feedback, just like if you do a deep tendon reflex and it does what it's supposed to do. So that particular individual had an intact rectus femoris muscle. When I asked it to go weak by jabbing those muscle spindle cells together, it went weak like it was supposed to. I would now use that muscle through some of my other physical exam evaluations that I rely on as an AK practitioner or a quantum neurology person, things like that. The question that just popped up on the chat a second ago was, what do you think about an approach? I'm sorry, what would you think about and approach a memory problem in which the person has thought of something that they want to do, and then the thought immediately evaporates as if it turned into smoke before they even get to doing the short-term memory? What supplements would you try? So in that scenario, if I had a patient who just like thinks of something, but it loses their mind or they forget about it before they even get a chance to act on it, I like RNA as a way to go about that. I like neurogenics as an inflammatory reducer. I like Oprima, EPA, DHA. If I was just throwing together a program of like, hey, how might I help this? I'd probably lean in that area. Keeping in mind that I've already started talking to them about lowering their carbohydrates in their diet because carb mismanagement leads to neuroinflammation. So I'm already changing their diet. I might modify the foods that they know are triggers or that we might suspect could be a trigger for them. So I might get them off of certain inflammatory things. But from a supportive product standpoint, I like Oprima, EPA, DHA. I like neurogenics. I like RNA for someone that has that type of presentation. Someone says, if there is dysautonomia or autogenic dysregulation, will any or all of the muscle tests fail? Sometimes. So in the concept of using a manual muscle test for someone who has dysautonomia or POTS or autogenic imbalances in their autonomic nervous system, they may not be able to muscle test at all. I might walk in there and start trying to test a leg and everything's just weak. But I would propose that hypotonicity systemically throughout the body is probably a neuroinflammatory condition as well. So I might do something to try and get that nervous system to start engaging and firing more appropriately in order to use muscles as diagnostic tools again. So I start with the concept that you need a muscle to be able to told what to do properly. And if it's properly being told what to do, it's going to give me a very reproducible and efficient response. It's going to be strong when I ask it to be strong. It's going to be weak when I spindle cell it down and ask it to go weak. And as long as that's my baseline going in with each patient, I don't mind messing with them after that. So if there's a problem at the beginning and they're weak globally, that just tells me some stuff through AK or quantum neurology or chiropractically. They might just be subluxated out the yin yang and you just need to put something back in place, or they could just be severely jacked up. Like their adrenals could be shot. And I put something like Drenamin in their life, and now all of a sudden their muscles start working better. I might just have them suck on a salt tablet, and now their muscles start functioning more efficiently. There's a variety of things that could affect or impact the way a manual muscle testing works. which is why I hesitate to show manual muscle testing if you don't do it. But if you do it, that's a great tool to try and figure out what's going on neurologically with someone. This next one here is like a tandem gait test. We've all seen this before. You're pulled over on the side of the road because you're swerving and the police officer thinks you're drunk. So he has you walk a straight line, one foot in front of the other. That's none of y'all. I know that's not you. But you've seen it on the news. You've watched cops and you've watched the rednecks run in front of the cops whenever they're doing things like this. So therefore, a tandem gait test is a heavy cerebellar influence. So when you have a lot of alcohol in your life, you stumble and you fall. Well, what happens if your brain just is misfiring due to something? Well, we would expect that test to not work as efficiently as it could, even if it doesn't look like they're inebriated, right? So it doesn't have to be full-on alcohol toxicity to lead to a dysfunctional tandem gait test. It could just be someone who's neuroinflamed. It could be someone who has got a gluten sensitivity, like cerebellar ataxia, as a gluten go hand in hand, just like we think of Hashimoto's and gluten go hand in hand, or celiac and gluten go hand in hand. If you have a patient who's walking in like they're drunk and they're not, they could just be sucking down too much gluten, and you modify their diet and their neuroinflammation changes, and now all of a sudden you've been the hero for them that they've been looking for, because everybody else was just giving them, anti-inflammatory steroids or something like that. So needless to say, here's a gait test, but I like to modify it a little bit, right? I like to take patients and see if I can get them to fail tests and stabilize.
So what we're gonna basically do is pretend the person is walking a straight line, kind of like a
I'm gonna pause this and start it over, sorry.
test.
So needless to say, I like to provoke patients with tests like this and then see if they can handle it the next time I mess with them. So here we go.
All right, the next test we're gonna do is called the tandem walk test. So what we're gonna basically do is pretend the person is walking a straight line, kind of like a drunken test on the side of the road.
Think of the name of it, sorry.
So she's gonna stand and be able to go straight, one foot right in front of the other. Go ahead. We're looking for her to deviate off to the sides. This is a traditional cerebellar test. I'm just walking around with her, and that's perfectly fine. We're gonna come back and do it again. And occasionally I'll just gently push them to see how they recover as they go down the midline again. So I do that. And I just gently push. And I'm looking to see if she can compensate appropriately and maintain balance. An exaggerated response, give me an exaggerated response if I gently push you, or one that's out of whack would be within one. Something like this. In that scenario, just like we mentioned in some of the other slides, I will place something on her tongue, RNA, neurotrophin PMG, thymus PMG, or prima EPA DHA, something like that, to try and see if I can get her nervous system to improve upon that test. So if someone's fallen all over the place, I try and stimulate the nervous system, have them do the same test again, looking for observational change.
I'm glad I said that in the video because I forgot to mention it earlier. When I find these things are a little bit out of whack, I will do oral challenges on the first visit. It's a concept in applied kinesiology where you create a lingual challenge or a gustatory response to try and stimulate the nervous system to react in a different way. So if they're not able to perform autogenic inhibition, that manual muscle test like we talked about, I will put something on their tongue, assuming they don't have an allergy to that thing that I'm about to put in their mouth. So I ask them, are you gluten-free, dairy-free, kosher, halal, whatever? And then I'll put that on their mouth if I think neurogenics is going to fix it. And if neurogenics fixes it, that's an observational outcome from the physical exam that I just add into my notes. If I put neurogenics in their mouth and their muscle test doesn't change, or they still walk around like a drunken sailor, then I'm not going to give them neurogenics. Even if it might clinically make sense, it's not the most optimal thing for them in that scenario. So I'm going to go digging around for something that makes the biggest physical change in their presentation. And I like to do that with patients. That's why you see those bottles like on the back of my wall whenever I'm in my exam room, is I'll just open up the bottle, pull a pad tablet out, put it on their tongue, and then go from there. So this is another test just for cerebellum things. The cerebellar tests are really easy to do as a physical exam standpoint, especially as chiropractors. We did a lot with muscles and bones and skeletons and things like that. And if you're not a chiropractor, you probably see a lot of people coming in for aches and pains anyways. It's just a default kind of thing as part of my exam that I do some of these neurologic evaluations at the same time. But here's an example of a rebound test.
This test, we're going to do the cerebellar rebound test. And ultimately, we're trying to see how her nervous system does by maintaining pressure for a bit of time and then me quickly letting it go. So push up for me. And that's an appropriate test. She's able to catch herself without over exaggerating or pulling her arms up in an aggressive way. She's strong against resistance, spontaneously release, and she protects herself. If there's an imbalance there, we might expect an exaggerated response and a stumbling of the patient. So they're holding strong, and then when I let go, they take steps back because they can't maintain their cerebellar function. And once again, if that's not working properly, I might take something and put it on their tongue, neurogenics, thymus PMG, or DHA, whatever it might be, to see if they can get that neurologic communication to come back as we lower that inflammation.
All right, the couple of questions that popped up since we've been watching some of these videos. One says, what have you found supportive for tremors in the hand when using the mouse on the computer? So when you're doing something intentionally and shaking a little bit more, rather than at a relaxed state and moving, I'm still going to look at cerebellar-based activities because that's going to control fine motor movement. I like, the common things we've mentioned before. I like thymus PMG. I like crazy amounts of Volpirima, EPA, DHA. I'll give them 6 or 8 grams of that a day. And I'm sorry it's going to bankrupt them because it's so much EPA and DHA at the time. But I'm going to try and throw that DHA up really, really high as a way to calm down that neuroinflammation, neurogenics, thymus PMG. I will also try and encourage them to eat more things like flava beans or velvet beans. Those have naturally occurring dopamine inside of them. They can be dopaminergic supporters from just a dietary standpoint. So assuming they don't have a problem with legumes, and they can figure out a nice way to make it in their diet, dopamine created or dopamine supported processes through diet could come from flava beans or velvet beans. Another question here was, what about post-herpetic neuralgia? What do you suggest? I am probably going to run a test like that TMB lymphocyte subset to make sure that their immune system is not stuck in a certain place. Because if it's stuck in a certain place, I'm going to try and swing that seesaw back in a different direction. And some herbs are a little bit more T stimulatory than B stimulatory in that TMB system. So if their T's are too high and their B's are too low, I will try and stimulate B side related things and try and take away T side related things. And as much as I like echinacea, if someone's stuck with T cells too high, I'm probably not going to put it on it because that seems to stimulate the T side more than the others. And I know there's a lot of, adaptogenic effects through the nervous system and through the immune system with herbs, but I still just kind of lean a little bit on this idea of T cells should stimulate T cell stimulating herbs probably shouldn't be in someone's life if their T cells are too high in their blood work. And I'll look for ways to pull that down. Also, I'd give them their body weight in Thymex. I do immune-based cleanses with people sometimes, and I'll have them take 40 Thymex a day. I'd probably do that with someone that has post-herpetic neuralgia. Make sure the arm is in an ergonomic position and not strained. Yeah, I would agree with that. You obviously we're doing stuff to not hurt the person during our physical exam. So if you're doing something and they're here and that hurts them, that's a terrible test to do on them because you're not going to get good results. If you need to bring it down here and still evaluate something or test in a different mechanism, use our doctor brain, see how we can make it work to where we're spontaneously releasing to give them a cerebellar challenge. This is one we might have all seen at one point where we have a chance to look at just balance. And this is a great video because that person that I was testing before, as awesome as she is, she failed this test miserably. And we can see what happens when you put something on your tongue and watch what happens as the supplements from standard process really have a chance to shine in this scenario here. All right, so here we go.
The next test we're going to do is a 1-foot balance test, trying to evaluate the proprioceptive nature that she's able to maintain. So we have the person get ready with their eyes open, lift one leg up, and then close their eyes. Very similar to what we did back in our physical exam classes. And you'll notice that she didn't last very long. So go ahead and relax. So both eyes open, establish balance with 1 foot, and then close your eyes. So we're getting about 5 seconds or so when that happens. Now, this could be cerebellar, it could be balance, it could be RNA, it could be all kinds of stuff. So what we're going to do with her is a real life example. Here's neurogenics. We'll take a neurogenics. Place that in your mouth for me. You have to remind people that stuff tastes like dog food, so this is going to taste gross. But hold that on your tongue and we're just going to see if there's a difference. Establish balance, go on one leg. Close, ready? So don't close your eyes, so you establish balance. And then when you close your eyes, that's better. Neurogenics helps her to do better, which is awesome. So let's try a different one. Want to spit that out for me? Yeah. Let's do We'll try RNA. This is a classic one. Most of the time we think of this test and related to RNA, but it could be any of these neuro and anti-inflammatories that we talked about already, or that you potentially have in your disposal. Go ahead and do that again. Establish balance. Then close your eyes. Now, so that was back to 5 seconds or so. So RNA did not seem to help. Neurogenics did. Therefore, that's how I might do the 1 foot balance test as an objective measurement to see what might change the neuroinflammation status of this person.
All right, so something to keep in mind is these physical exam findings are not pathognomonic to me to give that person that product. So just because that last person had a 1 foot balance test that failed at about 5 or 6 seconds, and I put neurogenics in her mouth and it made it better, but RNA did not, I'm still going to put on Dr. Brain and say, what's going on with her patient history, her physical exam, other findings, her lab tests, her symptoms, her desired outcomes for this visit, whatever it might be. But now I'm thinking if I need to start reducing neuroinflammation, neurogenics is going to be a much more efficient product for that than RNA. So let's make sure I can hone in on what I want to do, and then I'll incorporate my Dr. Brain to try and help her get what she needs at that time. So going back a little bit, there were some questions. What would you use, or would you use the same approach for trigeminal neuralgia that occurred post-COVID? I would look for ways to reduce neuroinflammation. I'd probably lean in toward the viral related stuff. I like an herb called star anise a lot. That like the majority of the world's Tamiflu is made from that. So when I think virus, I think that herb in my mind. But andrographis, echinacea, high amounts of Thymex. I like those concepts when working with people that have viral related neurologic presentations. So whether that's going to be shingles, Epstein-Barr type things, trigeminal neuralgia, I don't mind giving people 30, 40 Thymex a day because it's freaking amazing and people tend to do better. Keeping in mind, I'm still changing their diet, I'm supporting their body with nutritional support, and I'm going to do the neurologic rehab that I do through AK and quantum neurology type things. Another question here is, what is your first approach for a client 3 months post-stroke? 3 months post-stroke, it would potentially depend on if they're on clotting agents or not, and if their other doctors that are managing the stroke are allowing them to do things that might affect clotting. I like, Cataplex ACP for things like that to try and start getting the vascular integrity working better. Vascular Care Complex can help with that, even though we sometimes just think of that as like a hemorrhoid thing or a liver thing. But once I can get the AOK from whoever's in charge of the stroke related stuff, I love DHA as a fish oil to bring down inflammation, to help kind of thin some things out. I like Cataplex B2 as a vasodilator, and then some of these other neuroinflammatory things we talked about already, because I want that neuroinflammation to improve. So never mind, that patient didn't have a stroke. There was a different patient that came in that had a version of dementia, Alzheimer's, but it wasn't stroke induced, so I'll skip that. But they were all kinds of jacked up on their exam. Neurogenics returned their peripheral neuropathy. And so they were experiencing neurologic issues and couldn't feel their feet. And I just did the old swipe thing. Does this feel like this? Does this feel like this? And I was doing that through their body, and they didn't feel anything on on their right leg. I put neurogenics on their tongue, just experimenting with it, and their sensation came back. I said, well, guess what? You get neurogenics. Has nothing to do with the stroke question you just asked, but that patient came to mind, and so I thought I'd tell you about it. Last Saturday, Chrissy mentioned a spitting test you did regarding mold and migraines. Could you explain those tests? Ooh, it's a local chiming in. Thanks for that, Emily. So I like to sample patients with mold sample test kits. Let me grab one real fast. No, don't worry about it. The lab is called Immunolytics. I'm gonna get one. I'm gonna get one. All right, I'm up here in my office, and it was easier to get away from the kids and the dog to make sure there was no barking or anything. Oops, sorry, I accidentally hit my mouse. So I get these little mold plates from a company called Immunolytics, and they're like $3 or so. I just buy a box of them, and this box of Immunolytics mold plates come in. I'll have patients spit on it, and then they sit in my back office, and I just watch to see if they grow. Because if someone's got a mold problem in their saliva, they've probably got an immune burden that's leading to neuroinflammatory conditions, causing gut-related issues, disrupting hormone-related activity, affecting weight management, causing energy and sleep problems. I like to test people to things like this. So it gives me an objective measurement that says, I think you have mold in your life because the mold plate is growing stuff. Now, to be fair, we don't know what mold that is because I don't have a way to assess that. So I, through manual muscle testing, will use their mold plate if something grows, kind of like a provocation vial, like someone might use a mercury vial or a lead vial or something like that. I will test the patient to their plate and then attempt to try and support their body through my applied kinesiology testing to negate whatever findings show up on the plate. It's kind of a weird thing I do. That's what Christy mentioned the other day in our workshop that we were doing or at the dinner. But that's what I use. The plates are from Immunolytics. They're like $3 a piece. I buy them 50 at a time, and I just buy them about once a month and just run through them to make sure that if something's growing, I have an objective way to see before and after, as well as identify something that no one else is looking for. All right. So Sarah asked a question about allowing vitamins. Client says NR made her angry. Oh, neurogenics. I'm guessing neurogenics made her angry. I've never heard of that. Client, I don't know how to speak in abbreviations. I'm not sure what you mean.
This is I believe this was the first one. She asked the question about the client that was 3 months post-stroke.
Oh, okay.
So
Yeah.
she's just kind of continuing on with her questions there.
Okay, thank you for that, because I wasn't sure what was kind of going on there. Thank you.
Yeah.
So someone post-stroke, like I said, I rely a lot on physical exam stuff. And so I'd hate to give a blanket protocol, but if vitamins are okay and neurogenic seems to mess with her, I mean, I definitely stop giving her neurogenics because I want a patient to have an enjoyable experience as they're getting better. I might need to slow it down a little bit though. Maybe I'm giving her just some like manganese B12 and some Orchex and just letting her brain suck up some minerals for a while to kind of calm her down, which I know isn't on our list at all. But we might use minerals like Mintran or Orchex or Minchex, something to just kind of bring in some calcium and magnesium or some other trace minerals to calm things down through the blood-brain barrier. Use some omegas if those are approved. And then I'd be doing some rehab stuff in our office. I use red lights and lasers. I use flashing red glasses like eye lights if you've ever used them. I do things like that to try and rehab the nerve communication at the same time that I'm biochemically supporting people in those scenarios. You've been given her Mintran and Cataplex B2. Yeah, Thymus PMG would be a great one. Like I said, if you're bored and you have nothing else to do tonight, go read that 20-page white paper on Thymus PMG, and you'll just assume that everybody needs it because it's huge on what the effects were on that animal model when Thymus PMG came into their life, on how it helped reduce that neuroinflammatory cascade and how important that can be. All right, one last test here is just like a head shake test. We're going back to some more cerebellar things. It's a super easy test. You've probably seen something like this as a physical exam.
So last test would be a head shake test. Essentially, we're going to shake our head as aggressively as possible and then try and perform something that requires coordination and balance. So in this scenario, we're going to shake our head and go down and touch our toes and make sure that we maintain balance as if we haven't done anything like a head shake. So first, we'll get our baseline. Go down and touch your toes. We don't lose balance, we don't lose coordination. She basically touched her toes without any issue. So now we're going to shake our head a bunch aggressively. And after we do that for a few seconds, go down and touch her toes. We're looking to see, does she coordinate appropriately or does she fall over or stumble? Let's actually have you maintain and hold that a little bit longer. So go down and touch your toes and hold that there. Balance is perfectly fine. Go ahead and come back up. Shake your head again. And then go down and touch your toes. And that was not too bad at all. If for some reason, after shaking her head, she goes down to touch her toes and stumbles or falls, once again, we apply something into her mouth, and we see if that negates the test that was imbalanced.
With that particular test, you saw I gave her very poor instructions at the beginning. She did it too fast. That's not what I was looking for. The latter part of that, where she went down and stayed down, is how I would really do that test if I was doing it for someone. And I straight up would do that to someone that walks in and says, I have Meniere's disease, I've got vertigo and dizziness. Like I do that crazy stuff with them because I want them to fall over and say, wow, that sucked. And I was like, yeah, that did suck. But let's put neurogenics in your mouth or Thytrophin PMG in your mouth or whatever it might be, not Thytrophin, Thymus PMG in your mouth. Let's see what we need to do to try and get you to get better. And yes, I'm going to adjust you because I'm a chiropractor and I like doing that. And yes, I'm going to put lasers on you because I like doing that. But I'm going to change your diet. I'm going to put you on nutritional support. And I want to be able to find the exact nutritional thing that makes the biggest change and at least start them on that from very early in the process, even if I slowly build on their neuroinflammatory protocol as the visits go on. To go back to your question regarding the person per stroke, thymus PMG or neurotrophin PMG, what I told my kids yesterday was why not both, right? So as a muscle tester, I would just try and see which one seems to work best for her. Or if you don't muscle test, try some of these physical exam findings. See if she does one of them better than the other when neurotrophin PMG is in her mouth versus thymus PMG in her mouth. If you don't muscle test and you don't do the exams, pick one that works best for you that you like. There's a lot of research systemically with thymus PMG. Neuro PMG though is designed for brain and central nervous system. So I don't think you can go wrong with either one at all. You might find benefit in even doing both. So I don't hesitate to give people what they test for as long as it makes clinical sense and shows some pretty good findings with them. Thanks for your questions. So I'm just going to show you a couple of quick people. I know we're hitting that hour mark. So if you need to go, I apologize for taking your time too long. Hopefully you've enjoyed it, but I'll go through a couple of case studies just so you can see some before and afters with people and kind of get your brain thinking for a little bit. Then I'll stay as long as y'all want to answer questions because my wife's putting the kids to bed and I've got some time on my hands. So this is a person with Parkinson's that came in. You can see this picture was taken August 24th. So his sister would take pictures of him regularly and try and encourage him to just stand up straight. So this just happens to be a random picture. It wasn't for me specifically. It was just, she happened to say, hey, I took this picture a couple of days before your visit, trying to show him how bad he was. But he was diagnosed 5 years ago. He had been taking L-Dopa. His hand tremors were minimal. His jaw trembles mostly and he just drools a ton. So whenever he sleeps at night, he drools onto his arm and his arm looked like he had been beat with a baseball bat. It was like that bruised and just like aggressively irritated. So lots of like pH stuff in his mouth, as well as, just the concept of he's got dopaminergic issues. He's got Parkinson's. His facial expressions were going away. His posture was slouching. He still walks relatively normal with his gait. He didn't have the full on like fall forward and stumble across Parkinsonian gait, but the L-Dopa was definitely helping him, but not improving him. It was just kind of keeping things from deteriorating faster. So this was him, and this was my protocol that I put him on. Now, like I said, I do a lot of AK and quantum neurology, and it's hard to differentiate those visits when I'm in the office, but we could just call those like chiropractic / rehab visits in my office. I run 20-minute office visits. So he had 7 20-minute visits after I gave him his nutritional protocol. His nutritional protocol relied heavily on omegas, thymus PMG. I like minerals, so I like manganese B12 a lot as just like a general support the nervous system thing. Neurogenics. I gave him a decent amount of CoQ10 and I gave him Mucuna. If you're not familiar with Mucuna, Mucuna is velvet beans in a pill. So it's a way for me to try and get him some of that velvet bean stuff he may not be able to get through his normal diet if he doesn't eat them into his diet anyways in a supplemental form. So you'll notice this picture was August. This picture was August. This one was October. And this was as he was leaving my office. His sister saw it, and she just commented and said, dude, you're walking really well right now. He's like, am I? I didn't even notice. And she said, let me show you, and took the picture. And so then the first time I gave this lecture in a workshop here in Houston, I asked her, I was like, hey, I know you take pictures all the time. Do you mind sending me a couple? And so she sent me one from that October 15th visit and also the one from August 24th. But huge changes from posture. His mood was better. If I was a better historical documenting clinician, I would have shown you the petri dish that he spit into and the amount of hair-infested mold that just grew on that petri dish over about a 7-day period, because his program changed shortly after this because he just complained about his arm being burned and stuff still. So even though we helped a lot with his neurologic presentation and his gait and his walking, he still had some like microbial imbalance in his body. We used one of these immunolytics petri dishes that we just talked about. He grew a bunch of stuff in it, and I added additional antimicrobial stuff into his life after that. So some really cool changes to see like this before and after. But then let's talk about this person here. And then I just want you to play doctor for a second. This person is the person that's coming to see you as a new patient tomorrow. It's not going to be you're not going to see my after, but I want you to, in the chat, kind of start thinking what's going on through your mind. So on September 9th, this person comes in and they've been to the ER multiple times. And in doing so, sorry, I'm just opening the chat a little bit. In doing so, they've gone to the hospital. They've been diagnosed with these things. And now they're seeing you tomorrow morning. And it's 8 a.m. It's your first patient for the day. And this is what their paperwork tells you. I've got abdominal pain. I've got diarrhea for 3 months. I'm fainting and blacking out. I've got fatigue. I've got brain fog. I've got headaches. Doc, what can you do to help me? And you're like, I don't know. But yesterday I learned, let's run some blood work. Let's do some physical exam stuff. Let's just see what we got going on because this is crazy. And your symptoms were kind of all over the place, right? So, oh no. Is it not going to show the next slide? All right. Well, shocker. I didn't attach the slide that shows all this blood work to it because it's not going to that. Let's just imagine you now get to see his blood work. You see his hemoglobin A1Cs. I'm guessing now because I don't see it, but let's just say it's about 6.5 to 7. His C-peptide's elevated. His C-reactive protein's in the 20s. His iron levels are low because he's losing so much blood through the stool. His fasting blood sugar is elevated. His liver enzymes are up. His cholesterol is up. Basically, if you can think of something that's inflamed in this guy's body, you've found it on the blood work. And I'm sorry I didn't put his labs up here on this slide. It must have gotten messed up when I converted everything over. But let's imagine that's your person that's coming in tomorrow. What are you thinking on day one? How do you modify his life so that he goes home and tells all of his friends, you need to go see my doctor who helped me when 3 hospital visits in the last 2 months couldn't? So let's think about it. Brainstorm some stuff, put them in there. I see the first comment here says this person might have H. pylori or an ileocecal valve issue. Guess what? He did. We ended up running a GI map test on him, and H. pylori was up. He also had a bunch of, the FB ratio was really out of whack. He had a bunch of stuff showing inflammation. His calprotectin was through the roof. But we knew that because he had ulcerative colitis, right? He thought he had it at least, and the hospital thought he had it, but no one ran a calprotectin test for some reason. So as part of the GI map that was in there, his zonulin was up, his IgA was up, everything was just inflamed in this guy's gut. But definitely he had H. pylori, so it's a great call there thinking this person might have a gut problem that's leading toward some other stuff. Any other thoughts that you have as you're thinking about this patient? It comes into your office on Monday morning or tomorrow morning at 8 a.m. It says a silver Argentine 23 for silver with H. pylori, glutamine for the gut. Looking at allergies, look at parasites. It says here blood-brain barrier. Yeah. These are great thoughts to be able to look at because these are the types of things, the patients that come into our offices all the time. And if we only hyper-focus on the gut, which is what all his hospital doctors were doing, we miss everything else. No one, up till my visit, in the 2 months that he had gone to the hospital, no one had run a hemoglobin A1C. No one had checked his C-peptide. No one had checked his high sensitivity C-reactive protein. No one even looked at his iron panel for some reason, which was weird to me. This guy was pale. He was like a ghost walking in. You could tell he was anemic just from coming in. Definitely an anemia panel. Yes, and gluten intolerance. Heck yeah, his thyroid. So these are the types of things where you can see neuroinflammation that sometimes is so hypercompartmentalized in traditional medicine that we only look at the gut and we never look anywhere else. This person's inflammation was through the roof. We avoided inflammatory foods. We got him on a lower carb diet. We had him supported with lots of glutamine, lots of blood-brain barrier support. He was on chlorophyll. He was on glutamine. He was on, dang it, I should pull his folder just to show you. He was on all kinds of stuff. But a lot of the things we were talking about lowered his inflammation. And he came back in 2 weeks after our first visit and he said, hey, I haven't pooped blood in 2 weeks. What did you do to me? And I was like, well, we started lowering the inflammatory system in your body. And we started with brain-based things along with gut things because we couldn't separate them out. So lots of chlorophyll complex, lots of neurogenics, lots of, we actually put him on Fengrate. That was another thing we did for him, just kind of help with the mucus lining of the gut and with the brain. You guys have the tools to change people's lives. And the cool thing about it is when we use these products that are formulated so well, people can come in after 2 weeks and say, my life is different now than it was when I was going to see real doctors in the hospital and in the ER and no one was helping. So think about this tomorrow when you go in. Don't be afraid to practice on some people and just test it out and say, you know what, guy, I've never muscle tested before. Let me just try something on you today. 2-minute test. That's a good strong muscle. Let me jab on this. Let me test that muscle again. Wow, it went weak. You got a normal testing muscle. That's pretty cool. But what if it doesn't go weak? Open up a bottle off your shelf, grab something, put it on his tongue and say, we're just experimenting today. Don't even stress about it. And start playing with it, and you'll become a lot more comfortable and a lot more familiar so that when someone walks in and they've got allergies or parasites or dyslexia or autism or dementia or whatever, you will feel comfortable saying, I've got something that can help you. Because I know that when I modify your diet to an anti-inflammatory state, you're going to do better. When I support your body from an anti-inflammatory state, you're going to do better. And when you come in and do the therapies that I do with you in my office, you're going to do better. And their confidence level just goes through the roof as patients come in and say, yeah, I think I can help you. So thank you all very much for coming. I'm going to stay here and answer some questions if you have any. That's my presentation. Thanks, Bahan Consulting, for letting me come in and talk with y'all today. They didn't announce it, but I'm good friends with Jess Bahan. She had an opportunity to intern in my office, and she introduced me to everybody at the Bahan clan. So I'm super excited for that. Jess is amazing. I'm super sad she didn't stay in my office, but she's freaking awesome. I love Jess so much. She's so good. And she's the one that basically got me here today. She texted me and said, "Hey, would you be willing to speak for everybody else?" So I'm so glad that she invited me and glad that y'all let me come out and do this. So thank you all
Yeah,
very much.
well,
I'll stay here and answer whatever questions you have. And thanks for coming in.
we are super excited that she brought you, to us, and we're so grateful that you shared so much knowledge. I don't know about everyone else, but my neurons are firing, that's for sure. And I wish I would have taken some RNA and some neuroregenics before we started tonight, Dr. Chase. There are a couple questions in the Q&A box. What do you do to support a damaged blood-brain barrier?
So a damaged blood-brain barrier. It's really hard to separate the cells of the gut versus the lungs versus the skin versus the brain versus the sinuses versus the genital urinary system. Those 6 systems that have a barrier system that is selectively permeable to the outside world, or in our brain scenario, the outside of the brain world, are very similar. So there's lots of zonulins and lots of occludins and things that make that system work. So if something supports the gut system or the leaky lung system or the leaky brain system, they're going to help a lot in overlap. So I like glutamine a lot. I like chlorophyll complex a lot. That does a lot of good things to help strengthen up the barrier system. Once again, lowering inflammation to those cells are going to be good. Reducing inflammatory triggers. I mean, I don't know how crazy it is for some people to not think that gluten could jack them up or artificial sweeteners can jack them up or something like that. And I'm not hating on all gluten on all times and all people or whatever, but there are some people that those things are creating neuroinflammatory responses and just making that inflamed barrier system just go through the roof. So identifying the microbe, the trigger, the chemical, the metal that's making that barrier go up, and then try to help support that anti-inflammatory effect through. I really love chlorophyll a lot. Like it's ridiculous how good that product is. For anemias, for blood-brain barriers, for gut barriers. Here you go, clinical pearl. If all of you just write this down, you will change a menstruating female's life. The next time someone comes into your office and they're like, "I've been bleeding for like 3 weeks straight," put them on chlorophyll, start at 2, 2, and 2, and just tell them start going up to 3, 3, and 3, 4, 4, 4, 5, 5, 5 till the bleeding stops. And it's the craziest thing in the world because chlorophyll, someone told me, I think Stuart White told me that one time in like a private conversation. And I just remembered that and I was like, oh, let me try it. I want to believe how many women come in to see me with chlorophyll complex that fixes is a strong word. I can't say that if I'm being recorded. That dramatically supports their female hormone system and stops that period cycle that's been going for 3 or 4 weeks straight. Blows me away how awesome chlorophyll is, just as like a ubiquitous product that we can use for gut, reproduction, anemias, brain. Chlorophyll's legit. So good.
Yeah,
I don't know. I don't know if that was a good question or not, but blood-brain
Yeah,
barrier, I love glutamine, I love chlorophyll, I like lots of trace minerals or manganese B12. Oprima, I like Oprima, EPA, DHA a lot. I'm rambling. Next question. Sorry.
That's great. No, that's great. Thank you so much. Another question. A patient fell on the ice, hit the back of the head on the sidewalk, lost use of the thumb. It went limp, could not hold thumb close to the index finger. Any ideas?
Spitballing here. I would assume some level of, even though head has been hit, if it's a smooth controlled issue, like if they can't move their thumb at all, you could potentially have cerebellar inflammation. It could potentially be a neck thing. Like they could just have severe whiplash as well, because that's that dermatomal pattern for C6 that might be a little bit jacked up. So something a little bit lower in the neck, even though they felt it here, it may have jarred a whiplashy thing downstream. For peripheral neuropathy type of things, spleen desiccated, use that. I'm sorry, consider that whenever you have like a neuropathy type of thing. Large amounts of superoxide dismutase. So George Goodhart would talk about if someone's got a radiculopathy type of sensation. So if it's a weakness from a radiculopathy, or if it's a sciatic type radiculopathy where there's pain or numbness or tingling, he would always encourage people to take large amounts of superoxide dismutase, which we know is found in desiccated spleen. So we could do something like that to try and help peripheral things like weakness or numbness or shooting or zingers. Hopefully that gives you some ideas or thoughts there.
Yeah, wonderful. Great ideas and love the clinical pearls with that. There was another question about, can you expand? You talked a little bit about this earlier, but can you expand on what stimulates B cells versus T cells?
Kind of. Okay, I always have to cheat because there's a lot of herbs that do one thing versus the other. So your T cells and B cells, a division of your lymphocyte system. So imagine your white blood cells, you've got your neutrophils, lymphocytes, monocytes, eosinophils, basophils. If I were ad-libbing off the chart, I like my neutrophils around 60, my lymphocytes around 30, my monocytes less than 8, my eosinophils less than 3, my basophils less than 1. When I run a TMB lymphocyte subset, a CBC comes back with that, and I hope all of those are close to where they need to be. Obviously, if they're not, that could indicate certain levels of imbalance. But then when the T's and the B's come in, that's where we're going to see like your CD4, your CD8, your CD16, your CD65, 56. You're going to see all these little like side markers of interleukins. No, CDs, whatever the CDs are, I can't think of it right now. Those are going to be all a little bit off, and they create patterns where certain ones tend to go more toward T cells like NF-kappa beta or tumor necrosis factor, things like that, and others tend to lead more toward B cell activity. And if those start to get out of sync from a functional range, there are certain herbs that I just get super cautious with. So something like echinacea leads toward T cell stimulation, whereas something like reishi mushrooms tend to lead toward B cell stimulation. Whereas vitamin D seems to be regulatory for both. So it just kind of is an adaptogenic effect. So it's a TH neutral thing. So zinc, vitamin D, vitamin C, some of our thymus tissue, those can be regulatory in nature, whereas certain herbs tend to drive one more than the other. And so whenever I run those, because I do a lot of the muscle testing stuff, and I'll just test which herbs seem to test well versus which ones don't, I just always cross-check the list that I've got to make sure that I'm not giving them something, even if they muscle test well for it, that doesn't make clinical sense from what the T's and the B's are telling me. And that's where sometimes I just don't rely on my muscle testing because I'm like, I'm too nervous to give you echinacea when your T cells are through the roof, because this research paper over here says that it makes T cells possibly go up. And I know Kerry disagrees with that idea. He doesn't care about T's and B activity. And I think I just heard the old stuff first, and I haven't quite had the courage to override what Kerry says in my muscle testing. So I still lean away from T and B cell herbs with patients if it goes against my list that I have. So I hope that helps, but without bringing out the paperwork of the blood work and showing each herb and where it goes, I just mostly steer clear of like medi-herb things when T's and B's are really out of whack, unless I just know for a fact what it's going to do to that T and B cell. But lots of Thymex, lots of Conjuplex, lots of Imuplex, lots of vitamin D, things like that. And some individual herbs that aren't compounded that might do something with that.
Wonderful. There were a couple of people that had looked for the white paper and were able to find it. I looked just briefly and didn't see it either. So I will try to find that and get that included in the email that will go out tomorrow.
Okay.
I'll try to include that in there. So for those of you
You
that
just
are
go
looking
like
for that.
Thymus PMG, the regular like the PDF on the back end, or like the if you go to the website on the back end and go to products and then hit Thymus PMG, there's not a section down at the bottom that has the PDF tab sheet and then that link with it.
I thought that it used to be, but I didn't see it but I just looked briefly. So I will work on trying to find that and get that included because I know I've seen it. I have not read the entire thing cover to cover.
Yes.
The way you did it is a way better way, but it is
100%
amazing.
copy and paste with ChatGPT. Help explain this to me as if I'm 5 years old. And then I'll like copy sections and it'll explain. I was like, oh, that's pretty neat. So
yeah. What a way to do it and to use technology to your benefit. But that is an amazing study. So if you guys haven't seen it, we want to make sure that we can get a copy of that to you. And you can also reach out to your rep. And then there was one other question, kind of taking it from brain to heart, but we don't want to neglect that part of it. And so they have a best friend that has congestive heart failure, 55 years old, never smoked, drank, or drugs, no vax, but did have a case of COVID lasting about a month. The doctor says he'll die in 2 years or less. Any ideas that this HCP is new to this kind of work?
Okay. I like the comment that Sue put forward where she says she uses the heart sound recorder and lots of Cataplex B core, cardiotrophin PMG, and Cataplex B2. I really like that without ever having done an exam on this person. If someone comes in and says they've got congestive heart failure or cardiovascular stuff, I like leaning heavily on that. That little protocol right there that she just said. So that would be huge, even like at moderate to crazy doses. So I'd probably start at 6 Cataplex B core, I probably start at 6 cardiotrophin PMG and 6 or 9 cataplex B2. But in that individual, I would probably run a TMB lymphocyte subset on them because that's weird. You don't expect people that have normal bills of health prior to large infections to spontaneously develop crazy things in their life. So I'm going to probably dig a little bit deeper. Obviously, I'd run a normal panel to see what's going on. Like I'd run there. So, and I don't mean this as a hate against certain normal doctors, but regular doctors don't run large comprehensive panels on people. They just run like a CBC and a comprehensive metabolic panel, and they call it good. But I'm probably going to run some basic stuff to make sure that, you know, the liver's doing fine, blood sugar's doing fine. We're not having some hidden thyroid thing in the background. And then I'm going to include that TMB lymphocyte subset because I really want to see what their immune system is doing. There is another test that I find on the back end of Evexia, I believe, that's a COVID long haul panel. And I don't remember what it is because I've only run like 3 of them or so. But if someone had been more or less fine, got sick with something, and that something happens to have been in the last 5 years, I would probably run something like that to look at other antibody expression to just try and help me see where the immune system is attacking things. And then most of what I'm going to do, in addition to supporting the cardiovascular system through the products we talked about before with, you know, Cataplex B core, Cardiotrophin, and Cataplex B2, I'm going to start looking to see how do I start balancing that immune system that seems to be going haywire at that point. Because there's a lot of stuff that goes on with the immune system that just prevents normal physiologic functioning from occurring. So that's probably where I would go. Someone asked what the name of that test is called. I don't know. Literally, it's just something I set in the back end of Evexia one time and started looking up COVID long panels. If you message me or text me or get a hold of somebody to let me know, I'll find out what that really was and I'll message you back, Sue, if that question was really for me when it says what was that called. But
Yeah.
I don't
So
know
you
the
can,
real.
if you want to email me, and then Dr. Chase, if you want to send it to me,
Okay.
I can pass that along.
Perfect.
Because I believe Sue has my contact information. And I will say, Franklin, that asked that question, you can go to the website hsrinfo.com, and there's a find a practitioner section where you can look and see if there's any practitioners that are near you or near your friend that have an HSR. It would be great to have that run on them and just see what that looks like. And then, you know, be able to use that to monitor those changes and assess that improvement. Because I think with some of the nutrients that have been mentioned, you can definitely get some positive changes and a better outlook. And someone else mentioned Hawthorne, and that is a great option to consider as well in those cases. So wonderful information, everybody. I've really enjoyed all the interaction in the chat. And I think that you made it through all the questions, which is amazing. Perfect. And thank you so much for spending extra time on here with us this evening. I'm so grateful for that. And any final words before we sign off for this evening?
Yeah, going back to that cardiovascular question that we had, I don't know if I can just harp on how good Cataplex B core is. And I don't know the exact numbers. You might know these numbers, but from a CoQ10 product, that is the one that has most CoQ10 out of all of standard process stuff, correct? Are you familiar with that?
I know that Cardiotrophin PMG has some. I will have to check on the Cataplex B core.
Maybe I'm misremembering, but I thought someone told me that Cataplex B core had the most CoQ10 of all products of all the standard process line. And I might be misquoted, so I hope that's not being like taken as like written in stone or whatever. But I know like Cardio Plus has CoQ10, Cardiotrophin has PMG. I just thought there was a lot in the Cataplex B core. So maybe I'm just giving it to people as if it has a bunch of CoQ10 because it has something in there, but it's a magical product for people that have heart-related things. So I just love it for everything there. So sorry, hopefully that helps. I apologize for potentially teaching false doctrine at the conclusion here. But that might be it. But final words, no, I mean, y'all are awesome. And thank you so much for coming out today and sharing your time with me. I know everybody's got a busy Thursday night. You know, it's late, but go out there and just freaking crush it. Y'all are amazing. So it's good seeing people from, you know, New Jersey and Idaho and North Dakota and Houston and all these places. So y'all go out and, you know, we're changing lives. That's the cool thing about it. You know, we have an opportunity to be participants with these patients and with the awesome companies that support us. And together we make just this trifecta of awesomeness where we get to change lives through holistic ways. And it's so fun and it's a great blessing to be a part of. Thank you all for being awesome in your world and doing the great things you do with your patients. if y'all have any questions, never, hesitate, just reach out and we'll see what you can do to help you out.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. Those were great words to end on, and we're so grateful for your time and your expertise and all of the clinical pearls you shared this evening. And we look forward to hopefully doing some future things with you. So thanks for this opportunity and have a great night, everyone.
Have a good night. Thank you.